A forbidden encounter. The deep blackness of space stretched endlessly, cold and silent. Among the countless stars, a lone spaceship drifted. Inside, Jack Carter, a human astronaut, sat in the cockpit, staring at the glowing control panels. His mission was simple: explore deep space, collect data, and return home. But fate had other plans. A sudden beeping sound broke the silence. Jack's heart raced as he checked the radar. An unknown signal pulsed from a distant point in space. It was strong, rhythmic, almost like a call. "This is strange," he muttered to himself. "No human ship is supposed to be this far out." Curiosity took over. He adjusted his course, following the signal. As he got closer, his eyes widened in shock. A massive silver spaceship floated ahead, its sleek surface glowing under the distant stars. It was nothing like Earth's technology, far too advanced. Jack swallowed hard. An alien ship. His heart pounded, but he couldn't turn back now. Slowly, he piloted his craft toward the mysterious vessel. As he neared, his ship's systems went haywire. Screens flickered, and the engine hummed loudly. A bright blue light surrounded his ship, pulling it toward the alien vessel. Jack gritted his teeth. "Damn it, I'm being pulled in." Within moments, his ship was gently set down inside a giant docking bay. The doors sealed behind him. Everything became eerily quiet. He was trapped. Taking a deep breath, Jack grabbed his oxygen mask and unbuckled his seatbelt. He reached for his laser pistol, unsure of what lay ahead. The airlock hissed as he stepped out. The alien ship's interior was unlike anything he had seen before. Tall, glowing walls, floating orbs of light, and smooth silver floors that reflected his every step. It felt alive. Suddenly, a figure appeared at the end of the corridor. Jack froze. It was a woman, or at least she looked like one. Her tall, slender frame moved with an unnatural grace. Her skin was pale blue, almost glowing. Long, silver-white hair cascaded down her back. She wore a flowing robe embedded with glowing symbols that pulsed faintly. But what captured Jack's attention the most were her eyes, large, golden, and filled with something he didn't expect: curiosity. For a long moment, neither of them moved. They simply stared at each other, two beings from different worlds, caught in a moment neither had ever imagined. Then she spoke. Her voice was soft, melodic, and completely alien. "You are human." Jack's grip on his pistol tightened. "And you are not." A small smile touched her lips. She stepped closer, her gaze scanning him as if trying to understand what he was. "I am Princess Syra, heir to the throne of Zelfar Empire," she said calmly. "And you are not supposed to be here." Jack's mind raced. A princess, an alien empire. He had just stumbled into something way bigger than he had expected. "I didn't come here on purpose," he said carefully. "Your ship pulled me in." Syra tilted her head. "Yes, that was intentional." Jack's stomach twisted. "Why?" Instead of answering, she took another step forward. "I have studied your kind from a distance. I have seen your world through transmissions, but I have never met one of you before." Her golden eyes locked onto his. "You are different from what I expected." Jack frowned. "Different how?" She hesitated. "You are real." He let out a small chuckle. "Well, I hope so." Syra didn't laugh. Instead, she studied his face like she was searching for something. Fascination flickered in her eyes. Jack, on the other hand, felt the weight of the situation sink in. He was standing on an alien ship, speaking to an alien princess, and had no idea if he would make it out alive. "Look, princess," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. "If you're done studying me, maybe you can let me go." Syra's expression changed, a flicker of uncertainty, almost like hesitation. "You do not understand," she said softly. "If my people discover you, they will see you as a threat." Jack stiffened. "A threat? I'm just one guy." "To them," She said, "You are the unknown, and the unknown is dangerous." Jack's pulse quickened. So this was bad. Very bad. Suddenly, a sharp alarm blared through the ship. Kajira's eyes widened in alarm. "They are coming." Jack tensed. "Who?" She turned, her robe swirling behind her. "The royal guards. If they find you, they will execute you." Jack's heart slammed against his ribs. Great, just what I needed. Syra looked back at him, and for the first time, there was something else in her golden eyes. Concern. "Follow me," she said urgently. Now. Jack didn't hesitate. He ran after her, deeper into the alien ship, not knowing where this strange encounter would lead him. But one thing was certain, his life would never be the same again. The hidden desire. Jack ran behind Syra, his boots pounding against the cold metallic floor of the alien vessel. His heart raced, not just from running, but from the sheer madness of the situation. One moment, he was alone in space. The next, he was being hunted by an alien empire. The alarm screamed through the ship. Red lights flashed in rhythmic pulses, casting eerie shadows on the walls. Syra led him down a winding corridor, her movements fast and effortless, as if she knew every inch of this place. Jack, on the other hand, struggled to keep up, his body still adjusting to the slightly lower gravity of the alien ship. "Where are we going?" Jack asked between breaths. Syra didn't answer. She turned a sharp corner and stopped abruptly. Jack almost crashed into her. Before them stood a large, circular hatchway, its surface covered in glowing symbols. Syra placed her hand on the panel beside it. The markings lit up, scanning her palm. The door slid open with a soft hum. Inside, she whispered urgently. Jack hesitated for only a second before stepping in. The door sealed behind them, shutting out the alarms. The room was different from the rest of the ship. It wasn't cold and metallic. Instead, the walls shimmered softly, like liquid silver, pulsing with a faint glow. Strange floating orbs of light drifted around, casting a warm, golden hue. Jack turned to face Syra. "Where are we?" She exhaled, as if she had been holding her breath. "My private chamber. No one enters without my permission." Jack looked around. The room had an odd elegance, almost like a royal suite. A large, curved window revealed the endless stars beyond. Against one wall stood a floating seat, its cushions shimmering like woven light. This wasn't just any room. This was where she lived. Jack narrowed his eyes. "You're hiding me here." Syra nodded. "For now. The guards will search the lower decks first. They will not expect you to be in my chambers." Jack crossed his arms. "And what happens when they don't find me down there? Won't they start looking here too?" Syra didn't respond immediately. Her golden eyes locked onto his, studying him with an intensity that made Jack uneasy. "You are different," she murmured. Jack blinked. "Excuse me." She stepped closer, tilting her head slightly, as if he were some puzzle she was trying to solve. "Humans, you were always just a theory to me. A distant race, a primitive species we observed, but never interacted with." Jack scoffed. "Well, nice to finally meet in person." Syra ignored his sarcasm. She lifted a hand but stopped just before touching him. "I thought you would be lesser." Jack raised an eyebrow. "Gee, thanks." She frowned slightly, as if realizing how that sounded. "That is not what I meant. I have been taught that your kind is beneath us, that humans are not meant to stand beside my people." Jack met her gaze. "And do you believe that?" A flicker of hesitation crossed her face. She didn't answer. Instead, she turned toward the window, gazing out at the stars. "I have always been curious about Earth," she admitted softly. "I have watched your transmissions, read the reports about your people. But never have I stood face to face with one of you." Jack exhaled. He wasn't sure if this was a good thing or a bad thing. "So, what now? Do you turn me in? Pretend we never met?" Syra's hands clenched at her sides. A strange tension filled the air. "I do not wish to harm you." "Then help me," Jack urged. "Help me get out of here." She turned back to him, something unreadable in her eyes. "If I help you escape, I will be betraying my people." Jack took a step forward. "And if you don't, I die." Silence stretched between them. Outside the room, the distant sounds of soldiers searching the ship grew louder. Zaira's breathing quickened. There was something in her gaze, something Jack couldn't quite place. Hesitation, conflict, a forbidden thought creeping into her mind. Finally, she whispered, "I do not want you to die." Jack held her gaze. "Then help me." For a long moment, she was still. Then, as if making an impossible choice, she turned sharply and moved to a hidden panel on the wall. Pressing a sequence of symbols, she revealed a small, sleek hovercraft hidden behind the wall. "This can take you away from the ship," she said. Jack's heart leaped. "You're serious?" She nodded. "There is an uncharted moon nearby. If you reach it, I can erase your trace from our systems." Jack stepped toward the hovercraft, but then something unexpected happened. Zaira reached out and touched his arm. A soft, electric pulse shot through Jack's skin. It wasn't painful, just strange, intimate. Zaira pulled her hand back immediately, her eyes wide, as if she had made a mistake. Jack frowned. What was that? She took a slow step back. "I should not have done that." Jack's pulse quickened. "What does it mean?" Zaira hesitated. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, she said, "I do not know, but it is forbidden." A sharp pounding on the chamber door shattered the moment. "Princess, open the door immediately," a deep voice commanded. Zaira's face hardened. The decision had to be made now. She turned to Jack. "Get in the hovercraft. I will handle this." Jack hesitated. "But what about you?" She lifted her chin. "I will deal with my father. Just go." Jack met her gaze one last time before stepping into the hovercraft. The small craft hummed to life. As the door sealed behind him, he watched Sarah turn toward the entrance, her expression unreadable. The door slid open. The guards stormed in. And then everything changed. The chase begins. The hovercraft shot forward, slipping through the narrow passage of the massive alien ship. Jack gripped the controls, his knuckles white as he struggled to keep it steady. The smooth alien technology responded instantly, far different from the sluggish human crafts he was used to piloting. His heart pounded. Behind him, the chamber doors had slammed shut. Zaira was still inside, facing her people, facing her father. Jack gritted his teeth. He wanted to turn back, to fight for her, but what could he do? He was just a man, alone, on an alien warship, completely outmatched. The ship's warning alarms blared, red lights flashing as the security system detected his unauthorized escape. The entire ship was going on high alert. "Damn it," Jack muttered under his breath. He slammed the throttle forward. The hovercraft dove through a tunnel, weaving through the metallic corridors. Behind him, heavy doors began sliding shut, trying to trap him inside. Jack's muscles tensed. If one of those doors closed before he got through. He didn't let himself finish that thought. He pushed the thrusters to full power, sending the hovercraft rocketing through the final passage, just as the last metal door slammed shut behind him. For a moment, everything was silent. Then, his ship burst out of the alien vessel. A deadly pursuit. Jack barely had a second to catch his breath before his radar lit up with enemy signals. 3 sleek alien fighters peeled away from the mothership, their pointed silver bodies shimmering against the backdrop of the stars. They were coming for him. "Yeah, of course, why would this be easy?" Jack muttered. His hands flew across the controls, searching for weapons, but this wasn't a combat ship. It was a simple escape craft. Which meant one thing. He had to outrun them. Jack banked hard to the right, throwing the ship into a sharp dive. The alien fighters immediately responded, twisting through space in perfect synchronization, gaining on him fast. His heart pounded. The uncharted moon Syra mentioned was visible now, a pale, cratered world floating in the distance. If he could reach its surface, he might have a chance to lose them. But the alien ships were faster. They were closing in. Jack's instincts kicked in. He twisted the hovercraft into a sudden barrel roll, spiraling between chunks of floating asteroids that surrounded the moon. One of the alien ships clipped a rock, spinning wildly before exploding in a bright flash. Jack exhaled. One down. The other two adjusted their course, adapting to his moves, still on his tail. A warning light flashed red on his console. Target locked. Jack's stomach dropped. Missiles incoming. Desperate escape. Jack yanked the controls hard. The hovercraft dove straight down toward the moon's surface. The sudden movement threw off the lock. For now. The alien ships followed, their sleek bodies cutting through space like knives. Jack barely had time to process what was happening before he hit the moon's atmosphere. The ship rattled violently, flames licking across the edges as it entered at dangerous speeds. Behind him, the alien ships hesitated. Their vessels were built for space, not for planetary atmospheres. They held back. Jack wasn't so lucky. The hovercraft shook harder, systems failing, sparks bursting from the control panel. The moment he broke through the clouds, he saw what lay below. A massive desert, endless dunes stretching in every direction. Jack fought the controls, trying to stabilize the hovercraft. He was coming in too fast. The ground rushed toward him. With one last desperate move, Jack pulled up, slowing the descent just enough before. Crash. The hovercraft slammed into the sand, skidding across the dunes before flipping over. Jack was thrown from the cockpit, tumbling across the ground. Then, silence. Alone on an alien world. Jack groaned, rolling onto his back. Every muscle in his body ached. Above him, the sky was a deep violet, alien stars twinkling like distant fireflies. The hovercraft lay half buried in the sand, a smoking wreck. Jack forced himself up, staggering toward the ship. He had no supplies, no weapons, no idea where he was. And worst of all, he was alone. Vera had sacrificed herself to let him escape, and now she was trapped on a warship filled with people who considered him an enemy. Jack clenched his fists. He had to find a way back to her. But first, he had to survive. A shadow in the sand. As Jack took a deep breath, a strange whispering sound filled the air. His skin prickled. He turned slowly. Beyond the dunes, something moved. A shape, tall, cloaked, watching him. Jack's heartbeat pounded in his ears. He wasn't alone. And whoever, or whatever, was out there, had been waiting for him. Love V's duty. The wind howled through the dunes as Jack slowly stood up, his body sore from the crash. His mind raced. He was stranded on an alien moon, surrounded by an unknown desert landscape, and more importantly, he was alone. The hovercraft was beyond repair, smoking softly in the distance. It had barely made it through the atmospheric descent. And now, it was a mangled wreck. Jack wiped the sand from his face, his thoughts spinning. Vera had helped him escape, but what did that mean? Was she truly on his side, or had she just let him go for some unknown reason, out of curiosity, pity, or something else entirely? He couldn't stop thinking about the brief moment when she touched his arm, the spark that passed between them. It wasn't just a physical connection. There had been something deeper, something that felt forbidden. The air was thick with silence. The desert stretched endlessly before him. Jack began walking, aimlessly at first, just needing to move, to clear his head. But in the back of his mind, there was a gnawing question that wouldn't go away. Why had she helped him? Zyra's dilemma. Back on the alien ship, Zyra stood before her father, the emperor of the Zelfar Empire. His tall, imposing figure loomed over her, his gaze cold as the stars themselves. She had returned to her chambers under the pretense of handling a personal matter, but now she had to face the consequences of her actions. The Emperor's voice was like a blade. "You defied me, daughter." His words were measured, deliberate, the tone of authority unmistakable. "You allowed that human to escape, a creature that should have never set foot on this ship, a creature that is nothing more than a threat to our entire empire." Zyra's hands clenched into fists at her sides. The cold eyes of her father bore down on her, making her skin prickle. He was the leader of the most powerful empire in the galaxy, and her actions had now become an affront to his authority. "I didn't let him escape," she said quietly, her voice firm, though her heart raced. "I gave him a chance." The Emperor raised an eyebrow. "A chance? To do what?" "To destroy everything we have worked for. Do you think this human is worthy of your mercy?" His voice grew colder, more dangerous. "You know the consequences of defying me, daughter. Do you think you are above them?" Zyra swallowed hard. The weight of her father's disappointment hung heavily on her. For a moment, she didn't know how to answer. Part of her wanted to tell them the truth, to explain what she had felt, the unexplainable pull she had experienced when looking at Jack. But she knew it would be useless. He would never understand. "I know my duty," she said, trying to steady her voice. "But I also know what I felt." Her golden eyes flashed with an emotion she couldn't quite name. "There is something in him, something human, yet different. I could not let him die without a chance." The Emperor's gaze turned icy. "What you feel is nothing but weakness. A human is no match for this Elfar Empire, and certainly not for you." He stepped closer, towering over her. "You are the heir to this throne. You must be stronger than this foolishness. I will not let your emotions jeopardize the future of our people." Zyra felt a pang in her chest, but she did not flinch. She had always known the weight of the crown she would one day wear. She had always been trained to be cold, to make decisions for the good of the Empire, no matter the personal cost. Yet now, standing in front of her father, she was beginning to question everything. "I won't turn him in," Zyra said, her voice steady, despite the turmoil in her chest. "And I won't stand by while my people destroy him for something beyond his control." Her father's face darkened. "Then you are no longer my daughter. You are an enemy to the Empire." The return of the chase. Meanwhile, Jack continued to trek across the desert, his mind preoccupied with the thought of Tyra. The longer he walked, the more he wondered what was going on back on the ship. Had she been punished for helping him? Had she betrayed her own people for him? He didn't want to believe it, but he couldn't shake the fear that she might be in more danger than he had ever realized. Suddenly, a noise interrupted his thoughts, a low rumbling sound. The ground beneath him trembled as the sound grew louder and louder, until the ground cracked open, and from the depths, something emerged. A massive alien vehicle, built for traversal across deserts, hummed to life, its engines roaring as it slid to a stop in front of Jack. The sleek black surface of the craft reflected the light of the twin moons above. Jack's hand instinctively went to his side, but then he realized there was no way out this time. The vehicle's hatch opened, revealing Zyra herself, standing tall and proud. "Get in." Her voice was commanding, but there was something in her eyes that softened the force behind it. Jack hesitated. How did you find me?" "I've been watching you, Jack." Her voice was quieter now, almost gentle. "I couldn't just leave you out here." She reached out, her hand offering an escape. "Come with me. We don't have much time." Jack stepped forward, unsure of what this meant, but something about the way she looked at him, the way she seemed to care, even if it was forbidden, it made his heart race in a way he couldn't control. He reached out and grabbed her hand, allowing her to pull him into the craft. "I thought you'd left me behind," Jack said, trying to steady his breath as the vehicle powered up. "I could never leave you." Zyra replied softly, her gaze not leaving his face. "I don't know what it is about you, but I feel something that I can't ignore." Jack's eyes softened as he looked at her. He felt it too, the connection between them. But it wasn't just their emotions that threatened to tear them apart. It was duty, tradition, and the weight of their worlds. The craft lifted off the ground, heading back into the unknown. The desert faded behind them, but their problems had only just begun. The Empire wasn't going to let them go so easily. The chase was far from over. Betrayal and capture. The dark sky of the uncharted moon stretched endlessly above them, the cold night air sweeping across the barren landscape as the craft hummed steadily toward their unknown destination. Inside, Jack sat beside Xyra, her golden eyes fixed on the control panel, her fingers gliding across the alien technology with ease. But despite the calm exterior, there was an unmistakable tension in the air. They were running, fleeing not just from the Zelfar Empire, but from everything that had once defined their worlds. Jack couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. Every shift in the air, every distant sound in the wind, felt like it was carrying the weight of something ominous. He glanced at Tyra, but her face remained unreadable, as if she were hiding something from him. "You're quiet," Jack finally said, trying to break the silence. "What's going on in that head of yours?" Zyra's eyes flickered to him, and for a moment, Jack could see a shadow of doubt in her gaze. "I'm thinking about what's to come," she replied softly. "We can't outrun the Empire forever." Jack frowned. "So what happens when we can't outrun them? What then?" She hesitated, her voice steady, but filled with the weight of inevitability. "If they catch us, they will kill you." Jack's chest tightened. "And what happens to you?" Zyra's lips pressed together, and for a long moment, she didn't answer. Then, she turned her gaze to the horizon. "I don't know anymore. I can't predict what my father will do, but I know it won't be kind. He doesn't tolerate disobedience." Jack's stomach turned. The Emperor, her father. He hadn't realized how much her defiance would cost her, how much it had already cost her. Yet here she was, risking everything, even her own life, for a man she barely knew. The thought unsettled him, but he couldn't bring himself to question it. "I don't want to hurt you," Jack said softly. Zyra met his gaze. For the first time, he saw the fear in her eyes. Real, raw fear. "I know," she whispered, "but I will do whatever it takes to protect you, even if it means losing everything." The betrayer. As the hours passed, and the craft continued its journey across the barren surface of the moon, the tension between them grew. Jack couldn't stop thinking about what Xyra had said. Her father's power, the deadly forces of the Zelfar Empire, everything she had been trained to do. It all seemed to be at odds with the way she had risked everything to help him. But as the craft flew deeper into the moon's surface, Jack's uneasy feelings returned. The moon was too quiet, too empty, and the closer they got to the hidden valley Tyra had spoken of, the more Jack felt that something wasn't right. Suddenly, the calm atmosphere was shattered by the crackling of the communication system. A voice came through, harsh and cold. "Princess Xyra, you have betrayed your people. Surrender yourself immediately, or we will have no choice but to destroy you both." Jack's blood ran cold. The voice was unmistakable, the voice of a Zelfar soldier, but something about it felt off. Zyra's fingers hovered above the controls, her jaw tight as she glanced at Jack. "They found us." Before Jack could respond, another voice echoed through the ship, this time more personal. It was familiar, and it made his heart freeze. "Xyra, you have left me no choice but to take action." The voice was her father's. Jack's breath caught in his throat. "He's tracking us," he muttered. "Xyra, what do we do now?" Zyra's face hardened, her eyes flashing with a mix of rage and desperation. "We fight. I will not let them take you." Before Jack could respond, the ship lurched violently, and the craft's communication system screeched with a deafening howl. The air outside rippled as the ship was hit by a powerful energy pulse, knocking it off course. They were no longer alone in the sky. Zelfar ships. The alien forces had surrounded them. Zyra's hands flew over the controls as she tried to regain control of the ship, but the alien warships were far faster, their weapons more advanced. Her heart pounded in her chest as she fought to hold the craft steady. "We can't outrun them," Jack shouted over the sounds of the ship's alarms. "We need to hide." Zyra shook her head, her eyes fierce. "There's nowhere to hide, Jack. They know this moon better than we do. We have one chance." But before she could finish, the Zelthar ships opened fire. Betrayal from within. As the blasts rocked their ship, Zyra's worst nightmare came true. One of the enemy ships broke formation and approached from behind. Through the viewport, Jack could see a black shape descending toward them. But it wasn't just a ship. It was a Zelthar vessel designed for close combat. A retrieval ship. "Get down!" Zyra screamed. The hull of the craft groaned and split as the retrieval ship latched onto their hull with terrifying force. The sound of metal scraping against metal echoed in their ears as Zyra slammed the emergency release buttons. Jack was thrown to the side as the ship was rocked by another round of enemy fire. Zyra's voice trembled. "They're boarding us." Jack scrambled to his feet. "We need to fight. There's no time." Before he could finish, the hatchway to the cockpit exploded open. Several armed Zelthar soldiers stormed in, their weapons aimed directly at Jack and Zyra. "You have no escape." The leader of the soldiers stepped forward, his face cold and emotionless, the weapon aimed at Zyra's chest. "You will surrender now, Princess." Zyra's eyes narrowed. She didn't flinch. "You will have to kill me first." The soldier's hand tightened on his weapon, and Jack felt a surge of adrenaline course through his veins. He wasn't going to let them take her, not after everything she had done for him. But just as he stepped forward, ready to make a move, Zyra's eyes met his. And in that moment, Jack realized something. There was a reason the soldiers were here so quickly. There was a reason they had found them so easily. Zyra had betrayed him. Her own people had turned on her, and the enemy had known their every move. The ultimate battle. The cold metallic walls of the Zelthar retrieval ship closed in on Jack and Zyra like a nightmare unfolding at full speed. The clattering sound of armored boots echoed down the corridors, signaling the arrival of more soldiers, and the hum of the ship's systems began to feel oppressive. They had been captured. Jack's heart hammered in his chest as he was dragged through the narrow halls by the Zelthar guards, their hands unyielding around his arms. Zyra walked beside him, her head held high. But Jack could see the tension in her eyes. The same determination that had fueled her defiance was still there, but now it seemed weighed down by the reality of the situation. She had betrayed him. And yet, Jack couldn't bring himself to hate her. What choice had she really had? The empire she had been born into, her father, the man who controlled her every move. They were all part of a system she couldn't escape, no matter how much she might have wanted to. The guards pushed them forward, their weapons aimed at them with unflinching discipline. As they moved deeper into the ship, the air grew heavier, the low hum of the engines vibrating through the walls. Jack tried to focus, to think of a way out, but each step he took only brought him closer to a fate he couldn't avoid. The feeling of helplessness gnawed at him. Zyra's resolve. They were brought into a large, sterile room, its walls lined with harsh, fluorescent lights. A single chair sat in the center, and a small platform stood in front of it. A trial chamber. Jack's stomach turned as he recognized what this place was. It was where prisoners like him were judged. Zyra was forced to stand before the platform. The guards positioned Jack beside her, their eyes cold and calculating. Then the Emperor appeared. His tall, imposing figure filled the doorway, his eyes narrowed with an icy fury. Zyra stiffened, her back straightening as he entered, his presence as dominating as ever. "You have failed me, daughter." The Emperor's voice was a low, resonating growl that seemed to shake the very air. "You let this human filth escape. You defied me, your father, your Emperor." Zyra didn't flinch. She met his gaze, her face a mask of cold determination. I didn't fail you. I did what was right." The Emperor's eyes blazed. "Right." He laughed bitterly, a sharp, venomous sound. "You think betraying your people is what is right. You think siding with a human is what's right. Your actions have brought shame to our entire race." Jack's chest tightened at the venom in the Emperor's voice. This wasn't about him. This was about Xyra's defiance of her father, her refusal to follow the oppressive rules of the Empire. The Emperor turned his gaze toward Jack, and Jack felt the weight of that stare like a physical blow. "You," the Emperor hissed, "are an insect, a lowly creature, nothing more than a toy for my daughter's misguided whims." Xyra's voice rang out, sharp and unwavering. "You may think of him that way, Father, but he's more than that. He is not a toy. He is a person, just like me." The Emperor sneered. "If you had not interfered, you would have understood that humans are a threat, Princess. The Zelthar Empire does not need your mercy. We need control, and we need strength." Xyra took a slow step forward, her voice unyielding. "Then maybe your idea of strength is wrong." Jack's breath caught. He had never seen this side of Xyra before, the rebellion, the passion that now burned in her eyes. She wasn't just the quiet princess anymore. She had become something more, something dangerous. The battle begins. Before anyone could react, Xyra's arm shot forward, activating a hidden weapon embedded in her wrist, a blade of light, a sleek, sharp edge that flickered to life. She slashed it through the air, slicing the first guard's weapon in half before he could even react. Chaos erupted in the room. The Emperor's eyes widened, but his fury only grew. He reached for a console embedded in the wall and activated a force field, trapping the room in a shield of impenetrable energy. "You think this is a battle? This is a war, Princess." Jack was taken by surprise, but quickly regained his senses. Xyra wasn't just fighting for him. She was fighting for freedom, for herself, for them both. She wanted more than just survival. She wanted to defy everything that held her back. The guards closed in, their weapons now drawn, but Xyra was faster. With a fluid motion, she struck again, her blade dancing through the air, cutting down one soldier after another with precision. Jack stood back, trying to stay out of her way but also wondering if he should try to help. Suddenly, Xyra's father stepped forward, his figure larger than life. He was no longer just a man. He was a tyrant, a being of unimaginable power. His voice boomed through the chamber. "Enough." The force field shuddered as the Emperor unleashed a wave of energy. The entire room shook violently, knocking Jack and Xyra off balance. The Emperor raised his hand, and a beam of intense, purple energy shot toward Xyra, narrowly missing her but catching the side of her arm. Xyra stumbled back, the wound on her arm glowing with the burn of the blast. But she didn't falter. Her eyes locked onto her father's, and for the first time, there was no fear, only resolve. "I won't stop, Father," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I won't be your puppet anymore." Before the Emperor could respond, Xyra turned to Jack. Her expression softened, but only for a moment. "You need to run." Jack's heart clenched. "Not without you." Xyra shook her head, determination flickering in her gaze. "You'll be dead if you don't go now. They'll kill us both if you stay. Go. Find a way out." Jack wanted to argue, but he could see the truth in her eyes. She was right. There was no way both of them would make it out alive if they stayed. He had to survive. For both of them. With a final, lingering look at Xyra, Jack turned and bolted toward the only exit. As he ran, the sound of battle behind him echoed in his ears, but he couldn't stop now. He had to find a way to save her, and somehow he had to stop the Emperor's reign. A new beginning. Jack's legs burned as he sprinted through the narrow hallways of the Zelthar warship, his heart racing, blood pounding in his ears. The battle cries of the Zelthar guards echoed behind him, growing fainter as he ran, but he couldn't stop now. He had one mission: survive. And maybe, just maybe, save Xyra. As he turned a sharp corner, his breath ragged, his eyes scanned frantically for any way out. The warship was enormous, the walls stretching high above him, lined with more of the cold alien architecture that seemed to stretch into infinity. He had to find a way to escape, but more importantly, he had to find Syra. What she had done for him, the way she had defied everything, her family, her empire, it wasn't something he could just walk away from. But what could he do? She was the heir to the throne. Her father was the most powerful ruler in the galaxy, and Jack was just one man, a single human among the stars. But as he ran, a thought formed in the back of his mind. The Zelthar Empire was strong, yes, but it was also built on a fragile foundation, one where power, loyalty, and fear ruled over everything else. And fear could be overcome. The unexpected ally. Jack's legs finally gave out, and he collapsed into a darkened alcove, gasping for breath. His chest heaved as he leaned against the wall, struggling to gather his thoughts. Behind him, the sounds of the pursuit grew fainter, but he couldn't afford to stop. He couldn't risk being captured again. Not now. But before he could push himself up and move, a soft, strange whisper reached his ears. Pest. Jack froze. His instincts kicked in, his hand reaching for the hilt of the weapon at his side. But then he heard it again, clearer this time. Over here. Jack looked around, his heart racing, trying to pinpoint the source of the sound. There, at the far end of the corridor, a figure stood in the shadows, a figure cloaked in darkness. For a moment, Jack's mind raced. Was it a trap? Another Zelthar soldier trying to capture him? Or perhaps someone else, someone who could help. Come on, human. We don't have much time. The voice was feminine, low, and urgent. Jack hesitated for a second longer, then decided to take the risk. He stood up, his legs shaking, and made his way toward the figure in the shadows. As he drew closer, the figure stepped into the dim light, and Jack's breath caught in his throat. It wasn't a soldier, but a Zelthar woman, tall, slender, with pale skin and eyes glowing with a faint blue light. She was unlike any Zelthar he had ever seen. Her attire was different, more practical, designed for stealth, not battle. I know who you are, human. Her voice was calm, but tinged with urgency. I've been watching you. Jack frowned, still unsure whether to trust her. Why are you helping me? The woman's eyes flashed with something Jack couldn't quite read. I don't agree with my people's methods. I've been, on the inside, watching, learning. I see what's happening here. And I won't stand by while the Emperor tears everything apart. Jack's mind raced. You're a rebel. She nodded. In a way. I've been gathering information, trying to find a way to break the Empire from the inside. The Zelthar Empire isn't as invincible as they think. Fear is what holds it all together. Fear of the Emperor. But if that fear can be broken, if the people realize they don't have to follow, then everything will fall. Jack felt the weight of her words settle in his chest. She was right. Fear was the glue that kept the Zelthar Empire together. But breaking that fear was no easy task. The Emperor's control ran deep, his grip on power suffocating. I want to help you. The woman stepped forward, lowering her voice. But I can't do it alone. You need to help me break this ship. We need to get to the central control room. It's the only way we can override the Emperor's command. Jack's eyes widened. The central control room was the heart of the warship. It controlled everything. The weapons, the shields, the communication systems. If they could get there and take it over, they could sever the Emperor's control over the ship, over the entire fleet. But there was one problem. The central control room was guarded by the best soldiers the Empire had to offer. The best warriors, the best technology. Everything was designed to protect it. And Jack didn't have the firepower to take it down alone. We'll need a diversion, Jack said, suddenly realizing what had to be done. Something to draw their attention away. The woman's lips curled into a faint smile. I have something in mind. The final stand. The woman led Jack through the ship's secret corridors, down narrow passageways that seemed to twist and bend in every direction. Jack's mind raced with plans, strategies, and possibilities, but the weight of the situation was beginning to sink in. They were in the belly of the beast, the heart of the Zelfar Empire, and everything depended on whether they could get to the control room in time. As they moved deeper into the ship, the woman's pace quickened, and Jack followed, heart pounding, adrenaline coursing through his veins. They finally reached a large, sealed door, and the woman pressed a hidden button on the wall. The door opened with a hiss, revealing the central control room, gleaming, cold, and filled with rows of advanced Zelfar technology. There was no turning back now. The woman stepped inside first, moving with deadly precision. Jack followed, his breath steady despite the tension. They had one shot at this, one shot to take down the Emperor's control and send a signal to the rest of the galaxy that the Zelfar Empire was no longer invincible. The woman moved quickly, her fingers flying across the control panel, overriding the ship's systems. Jack stood watch, his eyes darting around the room. The alarms had started to blare, signaling an intruder, but they couldn't afford to stop. Suddenly, the door behind them burst open. Zelfar guards flooded the room, weapons raised. Jack's heart sank. They had no time left. "Go!" the woman shouted, slamming a button that activated the ship's emergency evacuation protocols. A blast of energy surged through the room, disabling the guards, but it also activated the countdown to the ship's self-destruct. "We're out of time," Jack yelled. The woman nodded, her eyes fierce. "Then let's finish this." With the control room now in chaos, Jack grabbed her arm, pulling her toward the emergency escape pods. They had one chance to escape this warship alive. But as they raced toward the exit, Jack couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't the end. The Emperor would come after them. He would never let them go. But Jack had learned something important today. Sometimes the only way to defeat fear was to face it head-on. And with Xyra's help, he would face it. Together.